The story of Culhwch and Olwen is one of the most important early Welsh tales involving King Arthur, and perhaps the most surprising thing about it is that it takes place on New Year's Eve. It is likely that in more ancient times the tale originally was ascribed to Samhain, but as the idea of the New Year was changed to January due to the Roman calendar, the time of the tale shifted with it. Now, the story begins with the marriage of Culhwch, son of Celidon and uncle to King Arthur, marrying Goladith. Taken together, their names seem to refer to the rising and setting of the sun, or Golai ir Gilith, Golai meaning light, and Dydd meaning day, and Culhwch meaning retreating from, or to moving away from. When Goladith becomes pregnant, and insanity falls over her and she goes about wandering the land. When finally it comes time to give birth, it takes place in a pig enclosure, the birth itself brought on by her fear of the swine, and so the child is born with swine and takes the name Culhwch, referring to the name for a pig enclosure. The symbolic significance of this birth cannot be glossed over. The mother goes mad when pregnant certainly relates to some quality of the child she is bearing, as does the place of his birth. Pigs, and most likely originally boars, are associated with the warrior cult, and is the madness suffered which is the same as the battle madness, and also the poetic madness. When Goladith dies, and Culhwch eventually remarries, his new wife curses young Culhwch that he must obtain Olwen, daughter of Ysbaddaden, Ben Cawr, as his wife. Even though Ysbaddaden is the chief of giants, his father tells him not to worry, but to go to his cousin, Arthur, and request his aid in the quest. Culhwch, decked in gold from head to toe, including golden shoes, and a magnificent grey horse with a golden saddle that churns up clods of the earth that were like birds trailing behind him, but yet rode so smoothly that not a single one of his golden hairs stirred upon his head. He arrives in this fashion on New Year's Eve, on a rainy night, to the court of King Arthur. At the entrance to the fort he is stopped by a porter, who says he serves only on New Year's Eve, but that no one shall pass save the rightful son of a territorial king, or a craftsman with a craft. This is certainly echoes of the god Lugh arriving at Tara in Irish myth, but unlike the tale of this event preserved in the Second Battle of Moytura, Culhwch directly resorts to threats to obtain entry. He declares that he shall utter 3 cries that will cause all the women to lose their pregnancy and become sterile if he is not immediately allowed in. This reveals a dangerous and magical power emanating from this golden young man. This difference is similar perhaps to Cuchulain's arrival at the fortress of Connell in the story of Gol and Gurav, where he first approaches and is refused entry, then picks up an enormous stone and casts it through the walls, entering through the wreckage. That this violent takeover was the original version might also be echoed in Lugh's stone-throwing contest with Ogma, which also has him casting a giant stone through the walls. What is obvious is that this element of Culhwch is taking part in the same original myth. The porter, in fear, goes inside to report the young man to Arthur. Arthur is told that despite all their travels through the world, there has never been a man as noble as this. Arthur commands him to be allowed in, saying, "If you came walking, run back," an injunction on all those who look to the light and who open and close their eyes. Give him drink from golden horns and sizzling chops. It is a disgrace to leave a man such as this in the wind and the rain. Thus, despite his golden appearance, Culhwch has arrived at night and in a storm, but yet seems to nevertheless be connected with light, perhaps the flash of lightning. When Culhwch is allowed inside, he does not dismount from his horse, as any other would, but rides straight into the court atop his steed, showing his authority over Arthur. Rather than showing courtesy to Arthur, Culhwch resorts straight away to threats against his fame and commands him to cut his hair, which seems to be an old custom, in this case a sign of the achievement of manhood. Arthur discovers that Culhwch is his cousin, and the request is made for assistance in obtaining Olwen. Culhwch then invokes almost every known heroic figure, excluding only those that would be obtained during the course of the quest. All of these figures are said to be under the command of Arthur, including Culhwch, son of Ness, which seems to be an attempt at a Welsh reading of the name Confronting, son of Ness. By this stage, these are literary versions of various deities, local mythical heroes, and historical figures all rolled into one, and in no way clearly separated from each other. Arthur himself, a potentially real historical figure, is playing the role of a supreme deity around whom all the other gods gather and take direction from, and yet there are still elements which preserve an underlying mythical structure. The image of Arthur presented here is not so different from Confronting and his red branch. Culhwch gives Arthur a year to fulfill his task of finding Olwen, but Arthur fails. Culhwch threatens to take away the reputation of Arthur, and in effect his sovereignty, but Kay and others ask Culhwch to travel forth with them to seek her, and he agrees. Eventually they come upon a large field full of countless sheep, herded by an enormous hound, and a giant of glorious appearance, but wearing only skins. And he reveals his name as Custennin, possibly meaning a chest or casket, and that he was chieftain, but was ruined by Ysbaddaden, and reduced to serving as his herdsman. He warns the adventurers not to confront Ysbaddaden, or they will meet their doom. Culhwch gives the giant a gold ring, and he heads home with Culhwch and the others following. When the giant's wife greets him, and he reveals the ring given to him, she asks where he got it from. And what he says is both mysterious and potentially revealing. He says he got it from a beautiful corpse that came in on the tide's crest. His wife insists on seeing this corpse, since the sea does not tolerate handsome corpses, and he points out Culhwch as being the corpse. Culhwch is then also identified as being the nephew of this giantess. We have seen already that Culhwch is associated with some strange attributes. He threatens to cause the deaths of unborn children and sterility to women. His mother becomes mad when she is pregnant with him. He shows up on New Year's, a time associated with crossing over from the other world. Now he is called a corpse, but one which does not succumb to the destructive powers of the sea. Though it may be surprising, this seems to correlate with some aspects of the god Lugh. In his conversation with Balor, he says that he will not be diminished by battles at borders, and that he could not be wounded even if his body, the body of the utmost of gods, was dragged beneath the waves. But he reiterates the sea's destructive power and how Balor will be driven beneath it. Elsewhere, Lugh is referred to as a spectre or ghost. Say's brother Dylan, the flood wave or tide wave of the sea, is linked to the sea, specifically the crests of the waves. Say is also associated with death and resurrection, as Lugh likely was in an original conception, as hinted at in the story of his prophesying to Conn of the 100 Battles, where he says that some people believe that he is dead, but he is not. Like Lugh, Culhwch is representing immortality. He is impervious to the destruction of the sea, and is thought of as being otherworldly, thus also emerging from the sea as a metaphor for emerging from the underworld and emerging from death. Within Custenn's house is yet another mystery, for it is revealed he has a son, locked away in a stone chest by the fireplace. The son has curly golden hair, but is given no name. It is revealed that 23 other sons had been killed by Ysbaddaden, and this was the last remaining son. Kay then invites the unnamed golden-haired youth to come with him, and that he will protect him on the journey. That the youth is placed in a chest and has curly golden hair seems to fit into the mold of Lle, contained in a chest by Gwydion, and the Irish version of the birth of Lugh, where all his other brothers are killed off by Balor. This may be confusing, as it would appear that both Culhwch and this youth, later identified as Gorai, meaning the best or supreme, are taking various parts of the same myth, and this is likely down to their being simply literary agents at this point rather than conscious representations of gods, and thus the original story is subdivided as many times as is convenient for the storyteller to weave together the story. Culhwch then meets Olwen. She is described in golden terms and is said to cause white flowers to bloom up after she walks. She is the daughter of chief giant Ysbaddaden. She convinces Culhwch to confront her father and ask for her hand. They go before him 3 times, and each time he casts a stone spear at them. The first time, Bedur catches it and returns the cast, hitting the giant's knee. The second time, Menu returns the cast and hits the giant in the chest. But most meaningful, the third time, Culhwch catches the cast and returns it, striking the giant through the eye. Surprisingly, none of this actually kills the giant, but that it should be Culhwch that casts a spear through the giant's eye is another representation of how he is in some way playing the role of both Lugh and Cian at the same time. Ysbaddaden agrees to allow the marriage, but only if Culhwch accomplishes a litany of feats, not all of which will be dealt with here. Many of them involve recognized gods, such as getting Gulvanon to help him sharpen plowshares, rescuing Mabon, son of Modron, from his prison, a magic cauldron of plenty from Ireland, the help of Gwyn ap Nudd in hunting a magical boar, etc., etc. For this analysis, the events around Urnach, the giant, are important. Kay is admitted into the giant's castle for his skill of sharpening swords. When the giant is impressed with his skill, Kay says he has another, even more impressive companion who has an ability where the head of his spear comes off its shaft and draws blood from the wind. Then it returns to the shaft. Bedur is brought forward, but Kay says though he is skilled, he cannot do this skill, and it's revealed that it is the son of Custennin who is the one who can do this. Somehow, the son of Custennin with golden curled hair then manages to bring the entire party into the castle through 3 courtyards, with the others sticking closely to him, at which point he is cheered and called Gorai because he is the best. The skill ascribed to Gorai is the same skill ascribed to the spear of Lugh in various Irish sources. It was said that when the spear left the hand, it would fly on its own accord and then return to the hand. Finally, skipping by the myriad of other quests they undertake, they return to Ysbaddaden when everything has been completed. They manage to shave Ysbaddaden, which had been his ultimate request, and then he agrees that his daughter now belongs to Culhwch, and that the time has come for his death. Yet it is not Culhwch that kills him, but Gorai, who cuts his head off and sticks it on a post in the courtyard, not unlike some versions of Balor's death. Culhwch takes over Ysbaddaden's castle and rules his kingdom. But we might well ask what the nature of this kingdom that Culhwch inherits is. Despite popular assertions, it does not seem that Olwen is, strictly speaking, a sun goddess. Her name, meaning the white track, is a name for a kind of white clover, but it's also one of the various references to the Milky Way, otherwise called Caer Gwydion, or Llwybr Saethog. However, it seems likely that this Olwen represents a type of goddess of fertility and abundance. Ysbaddaden and Balor might be equivalent in some way to Roman Saturn or Greek Kronos. In some Irish sources, the hill of Usnach, before the conquest of Lugh at the Second Battle of Moytura, is called Balor's Hill. Other sources ascribe the hill to Lugh and the Dagda. This might be similar to how the Capitoline Hill in Rome was originally named for Saturn before being acquired by Zeus. The victor, however, is a figure who is otherworldly, associated with light, but who arrives in the dark, who is imperishable, magical, who transcends boundaries and ultimately gains control of the productive forces of the earth. A shining, golden-haired god who either emerges from the sea or from the stone itself, as Lugh emerges either from the earth goddess Taltu or from the sea god Manannan. It would seem clear that Culhwch then is a character based on various attributes and stories regarding Lugh, and Gorai has been tossed in there to express a different aspect of the same myth. The god is no longer recognized as such in these tales, but the characters preserve elements that are very enlightening to us who study them. If you like this video, please share, subscribe, and become a Patreon supporter and help us out. Gurv Mila Magat, as Eishak Agus, Marigoni, Shas Gohard.